Can we talk about the fact that this is a queer joy movie getting nominated for Best Picture?
I think it's a very perverse game that Academy is playing.
You got to ask yourself, should it still be a competition? Should the format be completely changed?
She based off growing like this magical puberty, a universal element that like everyone goes to.
It definitely is Oscar bait, but the movie is a lot weirder than you might think.
It's funny because we're like, oh, critics are ruining whatever. It's like, but we're also critics.
Oh, I'm gonna start fires.
Hey everyone, welcome to the 95th Academy Awards Incluvie pre-show. We're excited to be getting into the Oscars for 2023. Talk about our favorite movies and actors and actresses and everything that is Incluvie friendly and more. Let's start by going around with the movie critics and introducing ourselves and our favorite movie or thing about the Oscars. I'll start. I'm Kathy Yee. I'm excited for Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Hi guys, I'm Atru Palit. I'm excited for The Woman King.
My name is Dana Ziyasheva, and I am rooting for Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Hi, my name is Josh Halpern, and I'm looking forward to Tar.
Hi, I'm Sarah Gabrielle Blood, and I'm looking forward to Everything Everywhere All at Once.
I'm Andrew Tanner. I'm looking forward to Black Panther, Wakanda Forever.
Hi, I'm MG Scott, and I can't wait to talk about Everything Everywhere All at Once.
I'm Bonnie Mukherjee, and I'm going to be talking about the Disney Pixar movie Turning Red.
Okay, I'll leave you to it. Have a good time talking about the Oscars.
So guys, Oscars are almost upon us. We are here at the Incluvie Oscars Roundtable to discuss movies from the point of view of inclusivity. So which movies do you think deserved to be nominated? Which ones deserve to be nominated but were not nominated? Atreyo?
So, as you guys know, huge fan of The Woman King, and I'm livid that it was not nominated. Not for Best Director, not for Best Picture, not for Best Actress, not for Best Screenplay, Best Costume. There are billions of categories it could have been nominated, did not get a single one. Another, I believe, should have got a nomination is still the Best Actress nomination was obviously there. Did not happen. I don't know why. And I guess it did get nominated, a Best Picture and a Best Screenplay. But where is Sarah Polley's Best Director nomination? Why is that not a thing? One thing positive, everything everywhere all at once got, yep, 100% deserved. Absolutely. I cannot wait for it to win every category. So let's go.
MG.
I'm not at all surprised that Troy was just immediately like, we need to talk about The Woman King and the fact that it didn't get nominated. I agree. I want to echo what Troy was saying about both Gina Prince Bythewood and Sarah Polley not getting nominated for director, because there were a lot of articles that were like, oh, there's no women being nominated for the director's category. And people are like, yeah, because there were no good movies by women this year. We can't just nominate women because da 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 da. And I'm like, did you see these movies? These are very worthy director nominations that once again are getting snubbed. So I hope we get another moment like Natalie Portman when she was just like, and the all male nominees are like, I just want to see that happen, because we need to acknowledge this, because this is a problem and it's an ongoing problem, and I'm just ready to see it rectified.
How about you, Banisha?
I'm very excited because Domi Shi's successful directorial work of the Disney movie Turning Red covers the giant red panda and the chaoses of adolescence, is qualified for an Oscar award. But at the same time, I'm kind of disappointed that Rosalie Chang and Sandra Oh, the two actresses who play Mei-Lin Lee and Ming Lee respectively, were not nominated for the Oscar Awards for Best Actress in an Animated Film. They should be featured because it features strong representation of Chinese Americans.
So Bonnie brings up a really great point. That's a category at the Oscars, or like most award shows, that does get neglected, because I feel like voice acting is so impressive. There's a lot of versatility to it, and there's a lot that you're doing that you can see it through the vocal performance. So that's a really interesting point, Bonnie, because that's something that there isn't a category for at the Oscars. And I don't know that that's ever, at least not going to happen anytime soon. I mean, animation films in general don't get enough cred for how brilliant they are. I like that we have an animated shorts category, because it does acknowledge that there are people who are doing these animated shorts, and they're not all Pixar. I actually got to see them this past week, and they're all so good this year. And I could just talk about the animated shorts on this, but I won't. But yeah, animation needs more accolades.
What do you think, Sarah?
Yeah, just to kind of snowball off of what MG was saying, it's interesting how the Oscars hasn't really evolved as much with the category expansion. I was kind of actually disappointed they haven't done it with casting. That was one of the ones that I felt that should be included because it's so essential to any film to make sure you have good actors supporting the whole emotional vein of a film. That's what the actors do. I know that the BAFTAs actually include casting, I believe, now. So they've evolved in that respect. I'm hoping that we'll see the Oscars include things like nominating these people who are actors doing the voice work on it. And like you said, MG, it's very, very difficult. It's exhausting what they have to do, projecting your voice, doing all these things, even with your body language when you're actually doing the character. So it is a lot of hard work and it should be credited for sure, along with many other things.
How about you, Andrew? What do you think about this year's Oscars?
I was just going to piggyback off of the Woman King snub. It's not surprising that the Black Panther Wakanda Forever was was nominated and the Woman King wasn't, in the sense that it's a more palatable blackness kind of thing when it comes to that film. But I even pointed out that the nominations for supporting actress for Angela Bassett, which is still like thanks that it finally happened, but she's been amazing for a very, very long time. And it was a safe choice in a movie with all kind of leads doing great things. And so the Oscars are kind of trash, but it's fine. It's fine. Just wanted to kind of point that out there.
What do you think, Josh? Would you reform Oscars at this point, or is it fine?
I agree with what's been said. I do think the Oscars are kind of ancient. You know, they haven't really evolved with the times. I mean, I remember when it was a big deal that they end the ceremony with Best Actress instead of Best Actor. I remember when they swapped those two. Maybe at the time it felt like it was an important step, but in retrospect, it's not that big of a deal. So, and yeah, I also agree about voiceover awards. I think they should be emphasized as well.
This year, there would be also Oscars based on popularity. We can vote on Twitter and select a movie that the public liked. So what do you think about this? Do you think this should be expanded and maybe become part of the main ceremony and done like long before and listening to people's opinion? Because after all, moviegoers are the ones who decide on what movies are good and what movies are not. Who should have the power in selecting the movies that are to be celebrated at Oscars? MG?
On Incluvie, we have two scores. We have the movie score and we have the Incluvie score. And it's similar to how on Rotten Tomatoes, they have like the critic score and they have the fan score. So I feel like there's always been these kind of warring parties in this conversation. The success of Everything Everywhere All at Once this year shows that we're kind of moving in a direction where indie filmmakers are getting to get to these stages where they're getting to have their day in the sun. I think about like 20 years ago, if Everything Everywhere All at Once had been out, like it would not be Oscar nominated. It would be this like niche culty thing that only a few people were really devoted to, even though it would be the same quality that it is right now. But I just feel like over the years, in particular, indie filmmaking has started to kind of come more into the commercial spectrum. And that's very exciting to me because I feel like there's a lot of really layered and complex narratives happening in indie filmmaking that just hasn't been able to make its way into some of the more mainstream Oscar baity types of films. So that's something to me that makes me feel like we're kind of moving in that direction, and what the critics are hailing and what the audiences are hailing sometimes meets in the middle, and sometimes it still is kind of having issues. We also have a bunch of different award shows. I mean, Sarah was talking about the fact that there's like the BAFTAs and there's the Oscars and there's also like the Kids' Choice Awards, People's Choice Awards. So there are other award shows that are more specifically targeted toward the fans and what they want. But I feel like the Oscars is so established. It's been around for so long and doing its thing the way it is that any movement that we make, it's going to be very gradual. And I don't know how long it's going to be before we get some of these changes. So, yeah.
Andrew?
So to piggyback off what MG was saying, personally, I think fans and the fan and critic thing is interesting, like the war between them, because I do think critics are out of touch with what maybe the general moviegoer wants to do. But I'm also not a fan of the rise of this casual critic on YouTube who goes and sees Nope and tells you it's a terrible movie because they don't understand the difference between I didn't personally enjoy and something is bad. And I think that's something a lot of people struggle with. And I think there used to be a time when critics were more trained. And so I would be annoyed with critics who don't get a cultural part of a movie or who don't get a certain aspect because of maybe gender identity, or even if it's just the economic background of the person, I would get that. But they would still at least have the ability to critique the technical aspects of the film and talk about if the story was cohesive, if it was understandable, how was the cinematography, right? Like, how was the pacing? They would talk about these things. Whereas I sometimes feel like we're in a new space where someone will jump up and say, Nope was a dumb movie because. And it's all over the internet and it's viral. And I'm just like, how is this person considering themselves a critic? Well, it's because we've lowered the bar for critic to like, it's in hell at this point. At the same time, I'm also not a fan of leaving all the power in like these high-ended critics in the New Yorker who often don't get movies or who only push a certain type of movie. Like, how many World War II movies need Oscars, right? I get the two sides of it, but I feel like the best movies are the ones that kind of meet the middle. And I think, like MG said, if you want more popular movies, usually a site like Rotten Tomatoes or even our site will tell you different scores to kind of point you in that direction. And then there are other award shows. So I think the truth is I want the Oscars to go away. Even right now, to me, they're only relevant because Rihanna's performing. So it's like the Rihanna performance with some award show around it right now. I feel like the Oscars will die because they've been sliding in relevancy. But I think the larger problem is that a lot of times it seems like critics are not in line with the average moviegoer. But I don't think that means the average moviegoer is like some awesome source for picking. I just think the two are not aligned. The critic is telling you some movie you've never heard of is the most amazing thing ever, and you're watching, you'll be like, huh? The film goer will tell you this movie that you're like, I see all the plot points like a million miles away. And so I always liken it to, in English, we talk about how there are people who mistake loving to dissect the book for the book being enjoyable. And so I feel like it's the same thing between fans and critics now.
We're talking about the impact of critics versus fans. As biased as we all might be, that's also why we are so passionate about what we're doing with Incluvie. We're kind of bridging the gap between these critics who are a little bit out of touch with what's going on, or like too focused on, is this what you would call an Oscar-worthy, technically whatever film? We're much more focused on the story and the character, and are the types of films that are being lauded, the types of films that represent the most number of people and these authentic experiences. It's funny because we're like, oh, critics are ruining whatever. It's like, but we're also critics. So I think the very first film class that I took was called Film Appreciation, and that gave me a different sort of perspective on how I wanted to look at things, because I think for most of my life I was like, film critic, that's what these people are who talk about movies. But I think there's a difference between film critic and film appreciator. And I feel like at Incluvie, we are more film appreciators than we are specifically critics. We need more of those kind of people out there doing that, because I think it does start to cheapen it a bit, like what Andrew was saying, when you have somebody who can just like get on YouTube, say, Nope was stupid because of this, this, and this, and it gets like a bunch of views, a bunch of likes, a bunch of reshares, but yet somebody who has like maybe a smaller YouTube channel tries to put something out there that's really like meaningful and insightful, but because it's not this like click worthy whatever, it's not something that gets a lot of stuff. And I'm not being like self whatever right now because that is kind of what I'm dealing with, but it's something that I feel like is a problem, because people would rather talk about the negative side of things than the positive side of things. It's much more clickbait to be mad about something than it is to be, lifting something up. So that's just a problem with society in general that we're not going to solve on this call. But
what is very interesting is that you employed the word warring. These public and independent critics and Academy Awards experts, are they at war? MG mentioned independent movies. Yes, it's true. Independent movies deserve to be at Oscars. But what about To Leslie? The movie gathered $26,000 at the box office, but I'm sure it was celebrated throughout all the independent awards film festivals. So what makes a movie to be Oscar worthy? And is the criteria always objective? What makes the quality movie that deserves to be at Oscars? Is it like technical part? Is it the craftsmanship? Or is it the love that it gets from the public? I'm not sure that critics really love movies. Critics, they, especially those who are in Variety or in New Yorker or IndieWire, they know about movies. But in fact, most of those critics, let's be honest, they are paid. They are paid by the campaigns that are run by professional PR companies that are hired for a very high amount of money to promote certain movies. And that was one of the issues that Viola Davis or someone from her circle were raising in media. They were like, how come she invested so much money promoting Woman King to get an Oscar nomination and it didn't work? What made Andrea Riseborough be nominated? It's because there was a certain ripples on the water effect when her agent mobilized all her Hollywood friends and they were doing private screenings, like Gwyneth Paltrow and then Edward Norton spoke about it. If we go into the granular details, can we really say what drives the Oscar nomination process, and are we actually celebrating the best movies in the industry?
One thing that I find very different from big award shows and just social media in general is there is a big gap. MG and Andrew both pointed out about what critics are lauding and what the fans are lauding. But one other thing is, for example, the person you mentioned about Nope. I mean, there are a bunch of people who came out saying Nope was bad. But interestingly, the few people that did say, yeah, it was good, their videos didn't get as much views. And I feel like there's something to be unpacked there because it's also about being able to freely express your opinions because effectively it comes down to colorism. People are not gonna give your opinions as much of weight maybe always. And what I love about the popularity award of Oscars is you do not have to publicly say that you're supporting this film or not. You just get to vote for that film. So when there's a queer movie like Bros, it would never get an Oscar nomination, I know that for a fact, but yes, I would actually write down the name of Bros if someone gave me a ballot paper or something. If I was asked to talk publicly about it, I would probably not have the courage to come out and say like Bros is the best film of the year. But I feel like that's a huge reason why we need a popularity award kind of thing. So the one other thing that's very important is the word that you were using, Dana, Oscar worthy. We have to take a step back and realize that one film cannot really be the best because there are so many perspectives. One thing that I love about Golden Globes, they have got two categories now, and I feel like best film can also be broken up into multiple categories because how do you really judge, for example, Everything Everywhere All at Once against something like Tar or All Quiet on the Western Front? They're very different films. So yeah, it's just very restrictive to be like, yeah, there are 10 movies that are the best, better than everything else made, and that's just not how things should be working. The biggest thing how we can tackle that is just giving other award shows as much importance as the Oscars because it's been around for too long and hasn't really evolved as much.
I'll give now the floor to Sarah.
As much as critics, definitely, there are some that know their stuff and understand what makes a good film. The thing to keep in mind with the Academy is that in theory, it should be about people voting who are in the industry, who actually know what components go into the films to make them as good as they are. And obviously, diversity has been a big issue over the years. And I think it is rooted in the history of the Academy itself because it was pretty much started because of the studios. So in the early 1920s, somewhere around there in the early 1900s, Warner Brothers wanted to pretty much promote their films. And so they set up a competition against other studios. And that's how the Oscars came about. So when you have a foundation that is so seated in competition and making your film better than somebody else's, when it's purely art at the root of it, what cinema is. So I think it's important to acknowledge this in a broader stroke of what the problem is essentially. So when you're trying to get these diversity initiatives through the Academy, that's why it's an issue because it's been rooted in this competition for so long. You got to ask yourself, should it still be a competition? Should the format be completely changed? How do we go about this? And that's a whole other conversation to be had, but I just wanted to mention that that's the root of this problem.
Almost all members of the Academy, they go through film school. And in a film school, we are all formatted according to the same standard. And we are put basically in a box. We are told that Citizen Kane was the best movie of all times. Yes, it was groundbreaking from the technical point of view, but it was not commercial success. And now it's frankly boring. I'm not sure that the fate of the world was solved in Citizen Kane, although that's how it is presented to us. So we need to remember there is this background on top of what Sarah just mentioned. There is this film school background that I don't know if there is a way around it.
Yeah, so I just want to piggyback off what Sarah said. There are so many movies that are talked about with so much passion and love for them. why do we let 5 hours of television tell us that, okay, these are the 10 or 12 films that deserve all your attention? You can forget about everything else that was done. Like, do we really want to keep going in that direction? Maybe we don't really need to make a competition out of it. Just like celebrate all the voices that are telling that, okay, this film showed me this about myself, or this film made me feel seen or confronted this problem, and that's why this deserves attention. And yeah, listen to everyone saying that about whichever film they're saying about it, instead of just like listening to some critics saying like, no, these are the 15 films that deserve every amount of attention. One of the reasons I said I don't want to pay attention to the Oscars anymore is because if I really just went on their word, I wouldn't have found out about She Said. I have a feeling there's a reason Hollywood didn't go out of its way to nominate that for an Oscar. There are gonna be a bunch of people who are gonna support the Me Too movement, and it has gathered a lot of support, of course. But yeah, I feel like there's still a lack of accountability. Why else would you blatantly refuse to acknowledge the existence of this film? Because other award shows have nominated it. It deserves to be heard about. And no, the Oscars blatantly are like, yeah, no, it calls us out. Let's not. So yeah, I just wanted to put that out there.
Yes, I agree that Oscars are at the crossroads due to economic situation. First of all, less and less people can afford going to movies. With tickets costing $14, I would rather stay at home and watch Netflix, right? So there are less and less moviegoers, and pandemic really rarefied the number of theaters. And then there is the fact that television once again produces more interesting content that appeals to people, and also the format is evolved. I watch now more and more series because that allows me to immerse myself. I relate more to the characters. It helps to build the characters. It helps to build the world, etc. So what would be a reaction of Hollywood? Because in the previous times when television was taken over, Hollywood knew how to adapt. Here they came out with the next Avatar, and there was like a Top Gun Maverick, but does it really help? Is this the salvation?
Avatar 2, The Way of Water. I know people have different opinions about it. I saw it in IMAX 3D and I thought it was a thrill ride. I mean, not to sound corny, but the visual effects were amazing. And I think James Cameron continues to do stuff technically. Like he's really pushing the medium forward. I really do believe that. I also wanted to say, Oscars have typically been a very political ceremony. Take that as you will, but politics and Oscars have just gone hand in hand for years. They take pride and pat themselves on the back when they select and award nominees and stories that are topical, controversial, and things like that. So I just wanted to draw attention to that.
The fact is that Academy is pretending to listen to people. They pretend to take our opinion into account, but they do it in a way that is too little, too late. Is this really like what we want? Because it feels like we have to always compromise with the Academy. We ask for more representation, and then they put movies that pay lip service to representation. But are they really the ones, or is just the same people doing movies that with the flavor of the month of the year, or whatever hashtag is going on? They would give it to us, but it would be by the same people who were doing the movies that we didn't want to see. I think it's a very, I would say, even perverse game that Academy is playing with the viewers, because they are constantly subverting our desires for their own agenda, which does not always correspond to the majority of people. So with that, I would like us to talk about the movies that were nominated this year and which ones you are rooting for, which ones you think should win. I would like us to look at those movies from the point of view of inclusivity, because that's what we are all about at Incluvie.
I'm going to add on this by discussing the feature film Turning Red. When you think of racism, African Americans are not the only group. Asians are being targeted now. Racism against Chinese people have spiked since the COVID pandemic. The virus started in Wuhan, China, and then there was all this racist sentences, Kung flu, China virus, Chinese flu, saying that they are responsible for the virus. That's not true, but that's what people believed in. To support the victims, Turning Red was created by Walt Disney Pixar Studios. And Domi Shi was the first Chinese woman to solely direct the Pixar movie. If you see the movie, we see there are a lot of Asian references like the temple, the giant red panda, the astral plane, the history, Sun Yi and her daughters. All of those features are features of Chinese women, representative groups that we support. The Chinese people are human beings too and are not responsible for the virus.
So, like Bonnie was talking about Asian representation, I think it's time to bring it up, guys. Let's just talk about everything everywhere all at once now.
I just wanted to talk about Tar briefly before we get into everything everywhere all at once. As far as inclusivity goes, it stars a homosexual music conductor. Kate Blanchett plays it very, very well. And the movie kind of discusses cancel culture and what that looks like. And the protagonist does things that are very unlikable. And, you know, in real life, she would be canceled. But it's interesting that we follow her, and Todd Field does a great job of humanizing her and her struggle. I just thought it was a really good film. And that's not a topic really discussed in any of the movies this year. So
The thing, oh, I'm gonna start fires. I didn't watch it, so correct me if I'm wrong. But I'm like, I just like Tar's a movie that kind of shows a person falsely accused who gets canceled, who has their life destroyed, who challenges the students not to dismiss white male composers, right? Because listen to the music over the person, man. Like, I'm like, this, it literally sounds like when you were saying what's an Oscar-worthy film, in my mind, sarcastic, I'm like, this is an Oscar-worthy film because it's exactly what the kind of voters who vote for movies would think is like this like super awesome movie. It is awesome to explore, but I feel like it's one of those things where it's a story that needs to be told. But you know what will be really brave and sad? A story where someone really powerful does bad things and they get away with it and there's no canceling. That would be a brave story because it actually happens. The Oscars knows that the nominations they do will make a certain narrative. And I just feel like it feeds into the narrative that, oh, we're canceling good people. And it's like, why is this the movie you'd explore? Why are all the movies about sexual abuse that are real not Oscar nominated? Why are the films that would challenge people to explore different composers and not just, as we call it in class, dead white man? Like, why are those movies not Oscar nominated, right? And then why do you put us in this position where it looks like I'm saying Tar is this bad movie when I'm really just saying why? I'm asking you why Tar is the focus and the only thing you can see. I'm saying that it's a great movie in what it's trying to do and it's a valid viewpoint, but why is it the only one the Oscars can see sometimes in these issues? I guess that's what I'm just thinking, like, to piggyback off of Josh, like, I think it sounds like it's a good movie. I'm going to watch it just to make sure that I'm being fair to it because it does actually sound somewhat convincing, but I can't lie when I said I rolled my eyes thinking, I can see why this is nominated because everything sounds like it sounds like a subtle pushback. It's really weird that people think Hollywood is this liberal, progressive, like awesome space when really they are just like not crazy conservative, but not really trying to like make anything progressive and new, or at least not in big steps. It's like incremental. We're not going to nominate things that shake the table too much, right? Like you can tap on the table, just don't shake it too much because hey, we're still trying to keep a certain image here, right? I even talked about this with the Black Panther versus the Woman King thing. They're not in direct competition, obviously, but it's just very interesting that one, it's only a supporting actress. And like, it's almost like a way, if you think about it, they've been criticized for not giving Marvel movies any attention. Oh, we'll finally give Angela Bassett an Oscar. And technically she's in a Marvel film. So then the news will come around that a Marvel actor was nominated for an Oscar. And now you can't say anything because she's here and there's a Black film. So you can't say Oscar's so white this year. Like that's all I see when I see this. And then getting Rihanna to come, please, young people, watch us, please. Like that's all I see with the Oscar, honestly. So I'm just gonna stop there.
I think the first thing we need to do is I think we need to separate Oscar worthy and Oscar bait into two different categories, because I feel like Oscar bait is a very specific type of movie. And sometimes Oscar bait is also Oscar worthy. It's like, oh, this was made because it clearly is meant to get Oscars, but it also deserves it. That happens sometimes. But then there's other things that are just like, this was made because they want to get awards. And so they're trying to check all the boxes that they need to check to get an award. I haven't seen Tar, so I can't really comment on it. I will say I do enjoy watching Cate Blanchett play queer. I think she did a great job of it in Carol. I think she did a great job of it in Ocean's 8. We all know she's queer in that. And I think that she's a fantastic actress. So I'm not going to say anything further about that because I haven't seen the movie and I can't really comment on it.
I get it. It definitely is Oscar bait. But what I will say is that the movie is a lot weirder than you might think.
I just want to quickly talk about Dar before we move on. I watched it today for the roundtable. In fact, it's really good. I have to agree with you. It's really, really good. And I love the fact that someone's talking about cancel culture in that way because it's a really bold take that they have. But also, I have this reservation about it because, like Dana was saying, the lip service that they do, right? There have been worse victims of cancel culture in history, and maybe dead white composers aren't the were sufferers of it. So it's kind of like playing safe again. Okay, we are gonna allow you to talk about cancel culture, but you know what? Keep it to people we like. It felt sort of like that. But Kate Blanchett being a queer, like, yeah, I'm just sold. That has to be there. Talking about everything everywhere all at once, there's a lot of perspectives about it and everyone loves it. I just know for a fact. So it's an indie movie, it does a lot, I'll give you that. But the best part of the movie for me watching it is I have lived through some of the moments of generational trauma that they've shown. I wasn't expecting to see myself a sci-fi film that got so much buzz, like, ever. Okay, just a little digression. When Miss Marvel happened, that's the first time I felt actually like, okay, so it's not in just in my local industry. People outside also realize what it's like to be Southeast Asian. And then this happened, and okay, it's just not Southeast Asian, but similarities are there. And if you guys grew up how I grew up, yeah, there's a lot of similarity. And I'm just grateful for the fact that the world is paying attention to a film that puts that out there because I have not related to something as much as I have with Everything Everywhere All at Once. I'm not a daughter of a Chinese woman, but yeah, it just works that way.
First of all, I loved Ms. Marvel. Like, that show was so fantastic. And if anybody hasn't seen Ms. Marvel, it's on Disney Plus. Please check it out. There is this sort of lack of diverse Marvel stuff getting as much praise as some of the less diverse stuff. So I want more people to watch the things that feature diverse stories because they're important. But Everything Everywhere All at Once, my gosh, I don't even know really where to begin. But I do think talking about representation, getting to kind of see your experience reflected on screen. I'm not Asian American. I don't have immigrant parents. That's not my story. So there's a lot of aspects about it that I can't fully relate to, and I shouldn't be able to, and that's okay. There's some things that are not specifically your experience, and that doesn't mean that you can't find connection points in the stories. I did not anticipate going into this movie that it would have a queer storyline. I did not know that was going to happen. I thought it was going to be this kind of bizarre multiverse, Michelle Yeoh finally doing action, getting to like be Michelle Yeoh in the most Michelle Yeoh way. And it was that, but oh my gosh. Donna, you want to know who I'm excited about being nominated this year? Stephanie Hsu. This performance by Stephanie Hsu in this movie, she completely embodies the sort of subtle acceptance of what it's like to not be able to connect with your mother or to not have your mother fully understand you. And especially as a queer daughter, she's just kind of like, she's never gonna get it. The very first scene we see, she's like prepping her girlfriend to see her family and is just like, this is what's gonna happen. She's already written her mom off at the very beginning of this movie. So the journey is not specifically for Stephanie's character really to accept her mom. It's that her mom needs to kind of like get it together and figure out her own stuff so that they can then come together in the end. And I thought that was a really interesting kind of undercurrent throughout the movie because it comes in every single thing that happens is getting you to that point where you need to see the two of them reconcile. But the way that Stephanie Hsu, like, she's also playing this villain, which is just really fun to watch. I mean, the number of costumes that these characters wear, and particularly her character, there's like these montages where she just literally goes through a bunch of different costume changes, and it's so like visually thrilling that you're just like locked in. But on top of that, the emotional layers to these characters and the different worlds that she's inhabiting, and particularly in like the real world, the laundromat world, I was just blown away. And I did not fully anticipate that. I was like, this is going to be Michelle Yeoh's movie. I'm just totally fine with that. I'm ready for that. And I'm excited to see Michelle Yeoh do her thing. But Stephanie Hsu surprised me and I was so happy about it. So yeah, that's what I'll say.
I wasn't expecting a queer story either, MG. And what I want to focus on here is that queer movies have been nominated over the years, like Moonlight and Brokeback Mountain and others, but something that they all have in common is suffering and trauma and a sad ending. Can we talk about the fact that this is a queer joy movie getting nominated for Best Picture? Like, Come on, this is a huge deal. So that was, I wasn't expecting it, to be honest. Okay, I was expecting it from a movie viewpoint, but because of the award show buzz, when I found out that there's a queer arc, I would actually expect it to go sad. Yeah, like they're doing a lot of things wrong, but thanks for the recognition here, Oscars, because love to see queer joy. It's a huge, huge step up.
And that is one of the advantages of diversity, because Daniel Kwan made a movie with Asian characters, and there are elements of Asian philosophy in it. And in Asian philosophy, people strive for harmony. So what you see at the end is harmony. It is a happy end, but it is because each of them find what they're looking for, and then they reunite. Family is extremely important, and at the end, family is what is reinforced through all those trials and tribulations and multiverse traveling through alternative universes.
That's true. The harmony thing is exactly on point, Anna. But one thing that's very common, like I have a community here, so I can testify that the harmony often leads to coercion. And what I love about the film is that it was genuine acceptance. It wasn't a coerced ending. So this is the best movie ever, guys. But yeah, this is one of my favorite aspects of it. The fact that we got to queer joy, but with genuine acceptance, which is also what I love about Turning Red, because at the end, the reconciliation between daughter and mother, that was not coerced. And interestingly, since we're talking about harmony, the difference in Everything Everywhere All at Once and Turning Red was the reconciliation was going through a coercion arc in Turning Red. The mom was not ready to actually be like, okay, we are different. No one, no, she wasn't. So the fact that despite that, the ending is about genuine acceptance instead of coercion, like, yeah, this is why I'm saying I feel seen this year by the Asian representation at least. They're very, very relatable. So
the conflict between a mother and a queer daughter in this movie is central, right, to the story. But I don't have a queer child, my child is straight, but I went through the same things with my son. What I like about this movie is the universality of what it is talking about. MG can relate to it, although she's not Asian. I relate to it, although like my child is not queer. Atreya relates to it. I mean, he's not from like East Asian culture, but he relates to it because it has queer thematic. So it's
I mean, I'm not
basically
even immigrant. So
yeah, when a movie is good, it speaks to everyone. It transcends the boundaries. And that's what I like about Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah, it talks to everyone everywhere all at once.
The movie Turning Red has like this universal theme like everybody can relate to. It's like a big throwback to like the early 2000s. Like it talks about like what kids today will never experience. No matter if you're lived in the 2000s or if it's like the 2020s, everyone goes through it.
Andrew?
But sometimes I think a film can be universal and you just can't see it because you might be looking at the differences and not connecting the points. So I just want us to be careful because sometimes a story can be very specific to a very specific demographic down to like the individual. And that doesn't mean it's not universal. It just means that you might have to do a little more work to see the nuances. And also, like, it reminds me of, there was a movie, the lady, she had a son and he committed suicide. He was gay, right? He was queer and he committed suicide. And she was like this like homophobic, super conservative person before it. And then she became an ally later. But she was talking about it in the movie. I thought was very brave of her, that the thing that got her the most was someone said, why did something have to happen for you to see his humanity? I think that's what we have to like be careful with, is like, you don't always have to connect to the person to see their humanity or see a story's humanity. There are things I watch where I don't personally connect to anything, but I still think that was a really cool story. Like, I love seeing someone triumph, even if that's the only connection I have. Is I love to see you triumph over whatever obstacles were in front of you. And as far as Everything Everywhere All at Once, amazing movie. Love the fight scenes. I love the silliness mixed in with the seriousness. I love the symbolism of the eyeballs, like, right, the yin and yang, and at the same time goofiness. I love like the rocks, right? Where like we're just rocks sitting and talking to each other. But what I love most is it was messy and it was not wrapped up in a neat bow. I like that she said, you are getting, whatever, you are loud and you are obnoxious, but you're also my daughter. And I'm like, that is real life. That is how we should talk to each other. It shouldn't be, well, I'm going to pretend like everything that I really feel is not real. No, she let her know how I really feel, but I also love you. And I will try to work on things just like you need to work on things, right? And so for me, that was the part that got me the most emotionally, is when she said it at the end. My friend was like, she's still gonna go there after all of this. And I knew before, I was like, well, just wait, just let her cook, and you'll see it. And as soon as she got to, but I still love you, I was like, that's what I knew was coming. And I think that's what makes it more real. Her not just like having a magical transformation. It's real life. Like, people will be like, I'm not sure I understand you 100%, but I'm seeing your humanity and letting you know I love you. And I think that's a more important message.
I absolutely agree with you, Andrew. There is universality in everyone's story. And I think filmmakers, screenwriters, directors, and actors, they have to be aware of the responsibility that is placed on them to make every little story, every individual story have the echo of universality in it. If they don't, then the public absolutely have to love the story, because it is a story about someone who's been like unfairly persecuted, for example. But what can I do if I don't relate? What can I do if director, screenwriter, and actor made everything to build this wall between me and the character? It's hammered in me that this is like a very individual, very personal story, and like all you can do, you just have to feel for this person, and I just don't feel. Making stories universal is an art. If we look at Everything Everywhere All at Once, it is just a story of mother and daughter relationship. That's it. That is there. And he blows it to multiple universes. And I relate to it, because when you love someone, especially if it is your child, it consumes you. It becomes like everything for you. There is no issue so small that it doesn't matter. And it's the same on the child's side. So it's basically explaining this relationship between mother and a child through these allegories, through this creating those alternative universes, etc. And I believe that at the end of this experience, when they reconnect, it's a war. After I've been through what I've been through with my child, I feel like I've been to a war. I come out of it exhausted. My whole universe was completely upside down, and I went through the places I never thought I would. So it's a little bit emotional, but I'm very happy that Michelle Yeoh was able to depict it, and the actress who played her daughter was so excellent at that. I think we should strive as critics, from the point of view of inclusivity, we should look that everybody's perspectives are like reflected, and they are very specific, but at the same time, everybody around the world can relate to it.
So yeah, I wanted to make sure we did not forget Huy Quan, who plays the husband in this movie, and his story is just incredible as an actor in the Hollywood system. I mean, most of us know, but he played in Goonies, and he also played Short Round and The Temple of Doom, Indiana Jones. And this man went through a lot of things throughout his life to try to get to this point. And if you haven't yet, please listen to one of his podcasts that he's done. I know he did an awards chatter one, and it's so inspirational. And I have mixed feelings about the Oscars, as a lot of us do on this call, but I'm watching the Oscars because I want to see this guy get the Oscar, because I get emotional just thinking about, the journey he's gone through. Being a fellow filmmaker myself, and how hard it is to get your foot through the door with this industry, it's not easy. The way that he made his progression, and he said for a long time, going back to inclusivity, I can't talk because I'm getting so emotional, talking about Asian representation and the industry, he had a hard time like finding a way to really find a role that was good for him, that would, fit his ambitions. It was hard because he felt like Hollywood forgot about him. And it just goes to show you how determination and just persevering throughout all of his struggles brought him to this moment. And he's getting, I think, Best Supporting Actor at the Oscars after so many years of not getting a prominent role. It's just incredible. It's very moving. I highly recommend listening to him talk about his journey. And then I had to also say, I think the fanny pack scene in the movie is probably the best martial arts scene I've ever seen in a movie. If you haven't seen the movie, I'm not going to say much of anything else, but yeah, it's pretty incredible. Paul Rogers did the editing for this. He won the BAFTA for it, so I'm hoping he'll win it on this one, because when I saw this movie, I was like, damn, the editing is so good. It's amazing. So that's all I have to say. So excited about this movie.
I'm glad Everything Everywhere All at Once is getting all the publicity that it is getting this year. And I still think the Oscars are putting this movie front and center, and the movie is going to get a lot more viewers than it would have typically gotten. So I think that's a good thing from an exposure point of view. Tar and Everything Everywhere All at Once, I was moved by both films. I think I was more moved by Everything Everywhere All at Once. I think what everyone has said so far really makes a lot of sense. The characters are very specific, but in that there's a universality that's very moving and emotionally resonant. So
this was something we talked about again in the other panel. A lot of our panels are just going to kind of like flow into each other. One of the things I said was there is specificity in universality. And I think that we've talked a lot about the cast, and we've talked about even the directing in this, but the script in this movie, like the key to specificity and universality is authenticity, is telling a story that feels real, that has like real characters and real struggles. So I think that's kind of the key element there. I also want to talk about Huy Quan because, yeah, what Sarah said about his sort of journey and like the story about like once he was no longer a child actor, the roles started drying up for men like him to be able to be in things. And what's really interesting, again, I recommend that people watch any interviews with Huy Quan talking about this movie because he's just the most endearing human. But he talked about the fact that he saw Crazy Rich Asians and he was like, oh, there's an opportunity. And he got this kind of FOMO for not being able to be involved with that groundbreaking project. And that's also like Michelle Yeoh, which is really cool. So like when he talks about the interviews when they're both there, she's just like, I'm sorry you weren't in it. And, you know, they have this great little back and forth. But also commenting on the fanny pack scene. My first takeaway from this was that I feel like Huy Quan and Everything Everywhere All at Once did for fanny packs what Tangled did for frying pans.
Yes, yes. I'm sorry, I had to unmute myself. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Like, if I had a Twitter, I would have tweeted that after seeing the movie because I'm like, this is the perfect like one-liner because it's completely accurate because you're watching this scene and because of the way that it's shot, and again, talking about the editing, talking about just the brilliance of the Daniels, you almost can see exactly what's about to happen before it happens. And yet it's still just as amazing, if not more amazing than what you could have envisioned. Because it is also very much an action movie. Like we talk about the emotional arc in it, we talk about the great acting, but the fight scenes, there's so many fight scenes in this, and the creative choreography that's in this thing is just so mesmerizing to watch and just funny. And we're also talking a little bit about the silliness and combining the silliness with the serious. And I think this film does a great job of balancing the two, which is what the Daniels are great at. So, yeah.
The setting of Turning Red is based in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. It's a realistic fiction movie. And the temples, like they're based off of China temples you see in life. Like you see like the Chinese characters. And another thing is like Malin Lee's shirt has like the maple leaf on it, which is like the Canadian flag. You can see there are a lot of realistic elements in the movie Turning Red because all the characters are fake, but it's based on a real person. I mean, Domi, she like chose like Ontario, Canada because she's been doing a lot of work on storyboard. And this is like her chance like directing like the first Pixar movie. And she based off growing like this magical puberty. A universal element that like everyone goes to, and like that's why it's like a realistic setting.
Great overview of the movie throughout our conversation, Bonnie. I would like to do a quick rundown of movies that were nominated but we didn't talk about, such as Banshees of Inisherin, like All Quiet on the Western Front, etc. So if you have any comments about those movies, now is the time to voice them.
Anyone who loves movies should see The Fabelmans because it is 100% a love letter to the magic of cinema, and not just like watching movies, but like why you feel so drawn to like make your own and tell your story your way. And it's the most personal thing that Steven Spielberg has ever done, and I think he just did a great job with it. It's not necessarily my favorite Spielberg, but yeah, it was exactly what I thought it was going to be, and I loved it.
I wanted to talk very briefly about Babylon and the Fabelmans that MG evoked. Those are all movies about making movies, basically, right? One is at the Hollywood scale, another one is at a more intimate scale. With this proliferation of movies about Hollywood, no one made a movie about Gordon Parks. And the Lincoln Motion Picture Studio, that was the first Black studio in Hollywood. Why they keep making movies about this epoch and they keep putting African Americans in those movies, but they never talk about this milestone that was like very, very defining for the history of Hollywood, but no one ever made a movie about that.
Firstly, huge fan of Babylon. I mean, I was waiting to talk about it because, like, Okay, not much relevance when it comes to Incluvie maybe, but honestly, if I want someone to know about Hollywood from the old times, no, don't watch Citizen Kane. Watch Babylon. You'll know the same thing too, and it's a heck of a fun ride, okay? But going off of what Dana said right now, another studio that I would love to hear more about, and there was actual opportunity this year to do it because Blonde was getting made. The movie didn't even mention the fact that she opened her own studios. The entire film was about victimizing her and the fact that because she felt like she wasn't getting the roles she deserved, she went out of her way. She was the first woman to have a studio in Hollywood. So yeah, I mean, exactly what you're talking, Gordon Parks or maybe Marilyn Monroe. These voices, these stories need to be told as well.
I have just one last comment to make is when is Bollywood invasion? We are on course with East Asian movies representations, but when Bollywood is coming to Oscars?
I feel like my film fan friends over here, we could do a roundtable here where we would actually give you reasons for why it's not made it there. And a lot of the reason is because the very problems that we're discussing with Hollywood exist here too. There are really not much of films being made that deserve to go to the Oscars that get highlighted. The movies that are really celebrated, the big box office successes, yeah, I have a lot of issues with them because they perpetrate the very issues that we go through on a daily basis. So I'm sort of glad that Bollywood hasn't made it to Oscars because then people will be assuming stuff about India too based on that. But I would love to see good stuff getting to the Oscars, good stuff getting popular here first. So here's hoping that happens someday.
I'm gonna keep it brief. If you want to completely skip the Oscars and make them irrelevant, I'm here for you.
So it's a Rihanna concert, so we gotta tune in.
Rihanna will record it for you, I promise.
Well, okay, guys, I think it was a very intellectual discussion. We were discussing Oscars more than we were discussing movies, but I guess that's what it is now. That's the situation. Thank you very much.
I mean, I have things to say, but I've talked a lot, so I want to give other people a turn.
I was about to cry on camera right now. That got me really emotional, Dana, what you said. Yeah.
Yeah, that was very sweet.
Are we gonna come to everything everywhere all at once after this? Or are we
Yeah.
keeping that for the last because once it starts, it will be the only thing we talk about?
I was like, this whole hour could just be everything everywhere all at once, to be honest.
Can we just agree to do everything everywhere all at once at the end? Because I feel like that would be a high to end on because there's a lot of negative stuff to talk about, and that is the biggest high at this year's Oscar. So
I'm all for talking about it, yeah.
Because I know once we get to everything all at once, like, it's over.